Hello. We are back. We are back. We are back. Tuesday Counseling Podcast, episode 5. It's been a minute. We've been gone for a while. My dad texted me and he was like, "Hey, did I miss an episode?" I said, "No, just haven't put one out in a minute."
I was at like lunch or something with my mom, I think on God, I don't know. I don't remember what day it was. Oh, it was Friday. And I was getting lunch with my mom and I was like, "Oh yeah, we have to record the podcast later." And my waiter heard me and he was like, "You have a podcast?" And I was like,
Like, do I ever?
"What's it about?" He was very curious. So
Oh,
our
is he gonna give
parents
it a
are our
listen?
biggest fan. Our parents are our biggest fans, and now my sweet waiter from Nikasina.
Yum.
Love that. Well, yeah, it's good to be back with the girlies. We've got a fun topic for today. I think we're still kind of in the process as we're doing episodes of like, okay, is our show geared more towards like therapists? Is it geared more towards client centered stuff? Is it for everybody? I feel like today's topic is maybe more geared towards people in therapy as clients. So basically, the gist is the therapeutic process, what it means to be in therapy, what that can look like, how to find the right therapist. Because I think that can be a really tricky dynamic too. I guess, does that seem like where we want to go? Does everyone feel good to talk about that? Okay.
That sounds great.
How have you guys had any swing and a miss situations finding your own therapists?
Yes,
I have.
my very first therapist ever, and I love her to death. But it was my first time seeking therapy, and I didn't really know what I was looking for, and I didn't really know what I was doing. No one in my family had ever been to therapy, and so like I had no idea what to do. And I found one, and she was great. She was so sweet. I loved her. She was just very non-directive. She was like what we think about when we talk about like how we love the theory of person-centered, but we don't like the way that it practices. That was her. Very much just like. And how do you feel about that? What's the worst case scenario? What's the best case scenario? So
yeah. So yeah, just not quite the vibe.
How did you break up with her, or did you?
I emailed her, I think.
Yeah, break up. Okay. The right word.
I didn't ghost her.
That's
good.
You were directive.
Yeah. Have any of y'all ever ghosted a therapist? I have. Whoops.
I have not.
I don't know. I feel like all the therapists I've seen have been like through, like in college I saw one, and then I graduated, so there's like a natural ending. I did have a therapist here when I was in grad school who ghosted me in a way. She had not really. She didn't really ghost me. That made me feel. She messaged me. My dog had just passed away. I was having a really hard time, and she messaged me like the day before our session. It was like, by the way, I don't take your insurance anymore. This is the price. That. It was very stressful.
No.
Yeah. So she did not ghost me, but that felt like a really abrupt. To our sessions.
Yeah. I feel like it is kind of a breakup. in some way. Like to end the therapeutic relationship does really feel like ending. It's an attachment that you formed that's ending either way. So like I feel like
Yeah.
definitely I've I've ghosted, which it was kind of the similar thing of like it was COVID. Like I went in college for a little bit, and then it was a thing where like we went home for spring break and never went back. But
Yeah.
I also didn't like her very much, so we went home, and I was like, I'm not. And I was in Oklahoma for college. She couldn't see me in Texas, so it wouldn't have worked out. But yeah, there's been some interesting therapists that I have learned a lot from as a client and as a therapist of ways that I will not practice similarly to them. And that's not nothing to me. I feel like that's still a valuable experience.
How
Okay,
did
cool.
y'all go
Mhm.
about finding therapists? Because the way I went about it the first time I was looking for one and the second time I was looking for one were very different. But I
Mhm.
was in grad school the second time, so I feel like I had a way better idea of what I was doing.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
I
What do
would
you got?
say in college, when I was finding one, I just Googled therapist near me. And she popped up, and I was like, she looks lovely. And she actually was really lovely. She was great. And then here, the therapist that I had was a referral from a friend who saw her.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So the more you
That's
know.
usually a solid way to do it. I feel like is
Mhm.
getting a referral.
Yeah, from someone who has
Um,
seen them before.
mhm.
Because it's hard on
Mhm.
Psychology Today profiles, right? Like it's just a lot of people to go through. It can feel overwhelming.
Yeah. It's a lot. It's a lot. I'm trying to think. At first, I think I did the same in college of like who is in Norman, Oklahoma that can see me. And then when I got to Dallas, it was kind of like, okay, I have no idea where to start. Like I didn't know any therapists, and so kind of got like some referrals, and then found my long term therapist by accident. I was looking for EMDR, and the person I'd reached out to was like, "Oh, well, here's my rate," and I said, "Can't afford that. Try again. Try again." So she sent me like the intern that they had on staff, the LPCA that they had on staff, and it was my therapist, and it was perfect. But definitely some trial and error. I went through probably three, two therapists before I like really found the one that I liked. So definitely, it's a trial and error process for sure.
I
Yeah,
speed dated.
yeah.
Um, what was that like?
I looked them up. I went through Psychology Today and I found three. And I set up consultation calls with all three of them. Like literally like back to back to back in the same day, I think. Um, and that is how I ended up finding my sweet, sweet, sweet Amanda Joe.
Mhm.
Um, I miss her every day.
Yeah.
Um, and
She's not dead, to clarify.
no,
She's
she's
okay,
not.
but
Good clarification.
sorry, I feel the need to say that.
She
She is
is
alive.
in a different chapter in her life. And, you know, speed dating and using Psychology Today made me very aware and made me realize, the research that they talk about like you look for therapists that literally look like you.
Wait, no, I never heard that.
You've never heard that?
Uh-uh.
Hmm. Yeah, like if you showed me, like, you've seen Amanda.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I mean, we had very
Yeah.
similar, right?
Yeah. Y'all did look
Yeah.
alike. Wait. That's wild. That's really wild. I'm thinking of some of my clients, I'm like, you look like me.
I
You
know.
look like me.
Uh-huh.
Oh my God. It's
Yeah.
like the Spider-Man meme where they're all like looking at each other.
Yeah. But like if
Whoa.
you were to show me, well, I guess a male therapist is different. I might not opt for a male therapist personally. But like, yeah, you literally look for, or you are more likely to choose a therapist if you like subconsciously, like they look like yours. I don't know. I'm going to
Wow.
butcher it, but
Yeah, well, and Aaron, tell me if I'm right here, but I think if I remember the research, and I feel like I just heard about it, so it may have been from you, Aaron, that was like the number one reason people chose. Like when they asked, it wasn't where they went to school or what they specialized in necessarily. It
Whoa.
was about the picture,
mhm.
how they looked is how people
Yeah,
chose them.
yeah.
Wow. 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 I'm imagining like if psychology today had no image of any therapists on
Mhm,
their site, it was just credentials, like how different of a process that would be, how different people might end up with a
mhm.
therapist had they had the picture. Wow.
Be an
Okay.
interesting research study.
I know. Ooh, yeah, it would be. I guess, do you think, and I'm asking, not expecting you to know the scientific reason, but like, do you think that has to do with our wanting to be understood by our therapist or have lived experiences that are similar to our therapist?
Well, I think, and this has nothing to do with the research, but if I had to guess, I would assume that like from like an evolutionary standpoint, if
Hmm.
someone looks like you, your like lizard brain is probably likely to say like, oh, they are a part of the same tribe as me, they are a part of the same group
Hmm.
as me, they belong, and so they are likely going to understand and validate my experience.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I agree.
that's really interesting. So, I mean, it's probably not an accident that people want to seek out therapists that are around the same age as them or would probably have similar suspected lived experiences to them. Do you think that's a prerequisite to having a good therapeutic relationship, having those things in common?
No.
Okay, I would agree.
Whenever, and we all worked at the front office and we did intakes for a therapist center office.
Mhm.
And I would say something that I learned, and maybe you all had this experience too, people really wanted to know about the therapist going in, right? Of like, have they gotten a divorce before? Are they married? Do they have
Yeah.
kids? And
Do
it
they
really
have
felt like a way of like,
kids?
yeah, it was a big one. People ask me that too. But of could they understand me? Could they understand this experience? And sometimes it felt like it came out of fear, right? Of if they haven't had this experience, would they judge me?
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. That was like we were posed a question in grad school one time of like, do you, I'm thinking about this now. I'm like, should I say this? Do you think you need to have like had sex to be a sex therapist?
Hmm.
Ooh.
Which I feel like is kind of
That's a good
like
question.
an interesting kind of parallel of like, do you think you need to have had XYZ experiences? Do you need to have had
Yeah.
kids? Do you need to have gone through
Right.
divorce? I feel like the years of experience when we were at the front office were really important too. Like, well, how long have they been practicing?
Yes.
Totally.
As if I had a list.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like all of this data from all of these different people. I was like, I have no idea.
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
old is how old are they too?
Oh my
I just
God.
email
Yeah.
them real quick and ask.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember even, because when I was working there, it was during like COVID-ish times, or maybe a little bit after. Like people would ask me, like, "Are they vaccinated?" when that was like a thing that
It's a
was
big
really kind of fresh and like it was very uncertain,
yeah.
what COVID looked like. I remember getting that question a lot. Even if they were going to be seen virtually, like that just mattered to them, kind of in suspected like political ideology, I think, which
Yeah.
is
As if we
not
have
something I knew about the therapist. I didn't
right.
have their medical record in front of me, but
As if
I
we
said
have
that'd be a great question for
their health information.
them. Uh-uh. But yeah, I think that is such a natural tendency to want to be known. And I think a way that we think we can do that is by being similar to our therapist. Like, surely you understand me. And I think that is true to a certain degree. Like, having, you know, being around the same age, I get that a lot with my clients of like, well, you just like get the references I'm trying to make, or like you're on TikToks, like I know you're going to understand the joke I'm about to tell, kind of a thing. And I do because I'm chronically online. And I think there's value to that. I guess my question is like, is that necessary to have a solid therapeutic relationship or rapport with a client? Not necessarily, maybe.
I think it may depend on the client, right? Of like what do they need to feel safe in the room? And when we think about like questions and whether we answer them or not, of like what's the intention of it, and all of those intentions seem to be like, could you understand me? Like, could we build
Yeah.
a relationship? Are we similar in some way? And I think some people need that, and I think some people don't need that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I think about like in grad school for me, being a culturally competent therapist was like really, really emphasized and very important. I think about like queer clients, like searching for therapists that are also queer, and
Yeah.
like that in and of itself, just there's a level of understanding um, in terms of
Yeah.
just being a part of a marginalized community and the
Sure.
understanding that is kind of already there. Um, so I think it depends. I think that you can have all of the knowledge and all of the understanding. Like I can be the most culturally competent therapist in the world to where, um, but I don't hold those identities. And so,
Mm-hmm.
there's just a level of understanding there that like, if that is something that is important to you as a client, then you have every right to seek out a therapist who also maybe shares an identity with you.
Right.
If it means that like you feel more comfortable, safer in the therapeutic relationship. But I mean, that being said, this was like full disclosure, one of my biggest fears in grad school. I would like cry and cry and cry and get so upset over it. Just the fact that like I am white, straight, and blonde, and like I look like um, someone that has like hurt, oppressed, bullied, et cetera, et cetera. Like, I am a part of the dominant culture. And if people feel safe and look for therapists that hold the same identities as them or look like them, like, does that mean that my work is going to just be confined to the identities that I hold and
Mm-hmm.
the way that I look? And that was really scary to me. I didn't want to be perceived by the way that I looked as a therapist and written off or have any preconceived notions about me as a therapist because of the way that I looked. And so
Sure.
there's part of it as a client that I understand, and then there's also part of it as a therapist that's like I would hope that people would be willing to take a chance on me even if I didn't look like them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in hopes that
Yeah.
like we could have a good therapeutic relationship?
Totally. Totally. And I feel like that's kind of where the word of mouth really comes in of like, hey, I love, love, love my therapist. Like, you should go see her. And maybe like it would be a client that had different identities than you, was a person of color, or like, was in a different lived experience than you. And yet a recommendation would be like, oh, maybe I wouldn't have like looked at Erin's page for that long, but actually like that actually could be a good fit for me. So
Right.
I think, yeah, it's such a balance. I think keeping an open mind and also, you know, having kind of your non-negotiables maybe at hand. Like, and that's funny because that's something I talk to other therapists about, even as well as clients or like people looking for therapists, is kind of like, is it a must kind of a thing that your therapist voted the same way as you, or is also a queer person, or any of these things that it's like that really really needs to exist for me to feel safe in a therapeutic relationship. Some other things I may be in like the yellow versus red or green, like I could kind of go either way. um, so I mean, I think kind of having your non-negotiables is really important. Topic for another day. That's something that I talk to a lot of therapists about as they're like new and kind of getting into the field of like, I'm looking for different practices to work at, and I don't even know like what clients I want to see, like kind of building the same criteria of like, here's the people I know I would really really work well with, here are people I'm pretty sure or practice ideologies that I could maybe get on board with. here's the stuff that as a clinician I can't work with or shouldn't work with. So yeah, I think I'm a list girly. I think all of us might be list girlies. That would be my recommendation is to kind of build out your non-negotiables when you're looking, if you're in the search process.
Well, and I think that's new, right? With social media and people talking about therapy, that's something that I had no idea. If you had asked me in college when I was looking for a therapist, what are your non-negotiables? I could not have told you, right? Like I would have been like, a kind person to listen to me, like that's really all I need. And now knowing so much more, obviously, about the field, I could come up with a whole list of non-negotiables. And I think people, now that they have more access and understanding, right, like what EMDR therapy is, what the different theories are, it is probably a lot more helpful going in and knowing what they want.
Yeah, for sure. It's kind of a scary process. It is kind of like dating. Someone should make an app, like a dating app for therapists and clients. No, maybe that's not a good idea. No,
But
that's
like,
not a good
oh,
Take that back.
I
me
saw where
trying
you're
to
going.
justify it, like I see.
No, I thought about it for a second and then HIPAA. That probably wouldn't be a good idea.
Well,
Tricky, yeah.
I would want it to be almost where like if psychology today like came into an app and like had a Tinder
Yeah.
type situation where like the therapist profiles were like on an app, and as a client you wouldn't need to like have like a full profile, but you could like go through and be like yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. And if you said yes, it would like send an automated email to a therapist that's like, I'd like to reach out for like a free consultation or something, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Psychology Today, if you're listening, you're welcome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Contact us. TM. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Because yeah, I'm like on the therapist side. I don't think that would work.
No.
Having prospective people that want to be in therapy. Shoot. Okay. Well,
But we found a workaround. Erin found a workaround.
yeah. One half of that equation would be cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It would be
Okay.
less intimidating.
It would be less intimidating. I guess, how do we feel about like therapist shopping, comparison shopping? I know Erin said she did kind of some speed dating for a minute.
I encourage it. I mean, when I have consultations with new clients and they say, you know, I'm shopping or, um, you know, I'm meeting with like a few different therapists, I'm like, and more power to you, as you should, you know? Um, because even for me with like a 15-minute call with 3 different therapists, like I was able to discern a lot. Granted, I knew a lot of the questions to ask being in grad school. I kind of knew the game a little bit, but I also knew after talking on the phone with Amanda, coupled with like what I had seen on her website and what I knew about her already, I knew that it was the best fit. And I think that um, I think you owe it to yourself. Like if you're going to spend money and invest in something, invest in yourself and invest in
Yeah.
yourself in like a very vulnerable way that like you deserve to have the best fit. And I would way rather do like 5 consultation calls than 5 intakes and, you know, pay for all of those and um, just like try therapist after therapist. So I encourage it, but what about y'all?
I wonder if whenever you had gone through everyone's website, did you have an instinct going into the 3 consult calls of like, I think Amanda Joe is my favorite, or did you go in like open-minded?
I think I went in fairly open-minded
Yeah.
because I liked all of them for different reasons. Like there were
Uh-huh.
different, but I will say like Amanda was, sorry girl, I'm just like giving out your information. She was, she like majored in kinesiology.
Yeah.
She was like a former athlete and like was very much like in the same circles that I was in. And so, again, to speak to like, there were so many things about my lived experience that she had a lot of access to from her own lived experience. And so, I mean, would I say there was no bias at all going into the calls? I think that would be a lie. But I was also trying to be open-minded in the sense that like, okay, just because this is so similar about us doesn't necessarily mean that these other two therapists might not be great fits. Um, so I think I went into it as open-minded as possible.
Yeah. Well, I'd be so interested if they did their research on if you just did a consult call and there wasn't the picture, you didn't go through their website, like if people would make different choices.
Mm,
Like
yeah,
just based on like what are people making decisions on? Is it the way the
yeah.
conversation flows? Is it there are certain questions that they're looking for?
Well, that was a huge part of it for me was I vividly remember one of the therapists that I was really excited to meet with, but was just very rote, like was
Mm,
just very like not a lot of like intonation in her voice, or it just felt very like
Mhm.
monotone. I was like,
this is not it.
this is not it for me. So,
Yeah. And that's not personal. That's just like a preference thing. And I feel like that's so valuable to everybody to offer that consultation. And I mean, I feel like I have so many consultations that it's kind of a 50-50. Like either people on the call will be like, no, I can book with you right now. Like I feel ready. And then some people like, I can already tell I'm never going to hear from them again. And that's okay. Like I'm so glad you met with me and decided. Like
yeah.
for me personally, when I'm looking, I think I'm kind of in the same boat as both of y'all of looking for kind of the things that I really am hoping that a therapeutic relationship can offer me, modalities, pricing, whatever. But if I get in and this person checks all the boxes, but I don't feel comfortable talking to them or the energy feels weird or off, like that's it. That's it for me. It's a no from me, dog. But if I go and I see a therapist who I'm kind of like, she checks like she's got a lot of like the yellow, maybe a couple green for me, but I feel like I can tell her anything. I feel like I've known her for 10 years and I've only known her for 10 minutes. Like, done. That's a done deal for me. And I feel like we've all had consultations where it just feels like it clicks and it's perfect. Like, that's exactly why we offer it. I guess, what was that? My other question for y'all was like, if someone is kind of walking, if a client is walking into a consultation, what would you recommend kind of their questions be for a therapist in their pocket? Like, I walk in and I want to know this about you as a therapist to make my
Mhm.
decision. Price, to be so transparent, that's usually, as a client, that's always my first question is how much is this going to cost? I'd
And I
like to
love
know.
when they have it on the website and you don't have to ask. I
Yeah.
think that that is
Yeah.
helpful.
We like to know that ahead of time.
Mhm. I have a list. Hold on, I'm pulling it up.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
I'm
the
trying to
first one
think.
is what are your fees?
Yeah. What are your fees?
I think my favorite question to ask my clients that then like turns into like kind of a question for them to be able to suss out if I'm a good fit is if they've been in therapy before. Like, have you been in therapy before? If so, what did you like? What did you not like? And then I can
Mhm.
kind of give you a kind of feel for whether or not like I'm more like your last therapist or
Yeah.
I'm different if you're looking for something different. So I definitely encourage like the conversation around like, okay, what did and did not work the last time that you were in therapy?
That's a great
Um,
question. I think that gives you a lot of insight as the
yeah,
therapist.
yeah. Um, I think if you're looking for a therapist that specifically works with like a specific population or a specific modality,
Mhm.
obviously asking about that.
Mhm.
Because honestly, like on the catalogs and like the Psychology Todays and the therapy dens, like they, when you're building your profile, they ask you to put like areas I work with, but like working with and
Mhm.
specializing with are different. And so, you usually get on Psychology Today and it's like this therapist uses like 20 modalities and works with like 50 different areas of, you know, whatever. And so, like, really nailing down, like, okay, you might say that you work with OCD on your Psychology Today, but like, how much do you work with OCD?
I think that's a great question. Yeah, if you're walking into therapy with like a specific knowledge around your needs of like, hey, this is something that I know I need incorporated into my therapy, like how comfortable do you feel with that as a therapist? How skilled, how trained do you feel? I think that's definitely important to ask. Um, I feel like I get a lot of questions around like, you know, tell me about your style, tell me about your approach, like kind of give me your spiel of who you are as a therapist, which I think as therapists we probably all have like our 60-second like elevator pitch of how we practice therapy. I think that's really important. um, I know there's a lot of conversation too around like shared values. I think that's really important in our field, and when you're walking into a new therapeutic relationship, as any relationship would be, it's like, do I have things in common with you, especially in terms of like, can I feel safe around you? So,
Mm-hmm.
kind of like we've been saying, of if there's an identity that you hold that you really, really want to make sure your therapist shares, I think you are within full rights to ask the therapist. They don't have to answer, but also their non answer might be an answer in itself.
Yeah.
So,
Also going in like in person and virtual, I feel like I get a lot of that of people because I do
mhm.
both. So people be like, "Can I do one day, and can I join virtually
Mhm.
next week?" I think that's a
Mhm.
big like, but to know like what works best for you. And some
Yeah.
people love virtual, and some
Yeah.
people love in person, and some people love a mixture of both.
Okay. Let's pivot. Not a question. This is just I believe it's just a comment maybe that somebody had, or a concern maybe that somebody had. They submitted and they said, all caps, my therapist told me to pray about it. All caps. And so by that, just reading the context clues of this comment, I'm assuming that that felt surprising
Yeah.
to this client or to this person. Um, and probably a little bit jarring, maybe not what they thought they were signing up for, or just wasn't appreciated. I guess, what are your first reactions to that calling question?
I love the all caps.
All caps,
Our
no
silence,
punctuation, just all caps.
our silence was deafening.
Hmm. I have a lot of thoughts. I have a lot of
Yeah.
thoughts.
I don't know where to
I'm,
I
I'm
start.
have
gonna I'm gonna be quiet
it.
though. I'm gonna let someone else share their thoughts
I feel
first.
like we all have a lot of thoughts and we're like,
Like chicken, a little bit. Who's gonna say? Who's gonna say it? Well, okay. My initial thoughts are, what what is your relationship with religion being incorporated into counseling? Is that something that you were expecting? Something that you
good
guys had talked
question.
about beforehand?
Mhm.
Was that a surprise? I'm gonna take a wild guess and say that that was not something that you guys had agreed upon beforehand, or that you knew you were walking into a therapist's office that was maybe going to bring that into the session. So that's my first question: is, was that expected or agreed
Yeah.
upon?
I would take a wild guess to say this wasn't discussed before or brought up in previous sessions. And I think it's a
Yeah.
really important question for therapists to ask, right? Of like spirituality, religion, like, is that a part of your life or is it not? To help guide them in that direction. I'd say as a therapist, it typically comes up and comes up from the client, right? If that's something that they want to be incorporated.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and
I
Avery, I
would say,
remember, oh,
go ahead.
Avery, I remember when you were building your intake, when you first started seeing clients, and I always ask in my intake now because put it in your intake the very first time you were seeing clients was like, what does spirituality mean to you? Like, does it hold any meaning in your life? And if so, like, tell me about it.
It's a great question. Because I will say I'm not a therapist that incorporates very much religion or spirituality or faith into sessions unless a client really specifically asks for that, but I don't really market myself that way. It's not where my expertise is. But that kind of counseling does exist. There's all sorts of religiously affiliated counseling that if that is your vibe, go forth. Go forth, have a great time. But I think it is irresponsible, dare I say, unethical of a religious counselor to assume that their client shares that belief or would like to use their paid time in session with you to enact like your belief system in my treatment, right?
Yeah.
Could be a whole rupture and repair situation between this person and their therapist. I don't know how
Seems like
that's
a
going to work out.
rupture. I hope there's repair.
I hope there's repair. Regardless, sounds like the point remains that this person felt really uncomfortable by it, and that itself is grounds for maybe telling your therapist, hey, that made me feel really uncomfortable.
Definitely telling them,
When, if ever, and this might be a hot take, is it okay to ghost your therapist? I have an opinion on this. I'd like to know y'all's too.
My initial, and I don't know if that I would stand by this, but is always, right? If that's what feels most comfortable for you, then I think you always have the right to do that. And as a therapist, that's my own stuff to deal with. But if that's what feels comfortable for them, then that's their right. They don't owe me anything as a therapist.
Right. That's kind of where I am. I'm like, you always have, the freedom to exercise in any way that you wish, right? And I would hope, it's like a double-edged sword because it's like, I would hope that our relationship therapeutically felt comfortable enough, safe enough, and empowering enough that you would want to have that conversation with me. And also the other side of that is if you feel so empowered and so just empowered, like I would hope that if that was what you needed to do, you just needed to walk away, that you felt empowered enough to do so. And so any feelings that I have about being ghosted by clients is like mine to take responsibility for. So it's hard. I feel like it's a double-edged sword a little bit.
Well, maybe it's not a hot take then. That's also my opinion of like, if that, like, sure, communication is great and wonderful. I think when it comes to like your emotional safety as a client or other versions of safety, like, leave. Like, it's okay. It's okay. It's happened to every therapist. I'd rather you not book another session to like work on the repair from that comment if it really feels irreparable to you. And
I mean, if I was told to pray about it in a session, I might never.
I may not return. But hey, I don't know the relationship you guys have. I don't know the quality of therapy prior to that comment.
True.
But I think if that really rubbed you the wrong way, like you don't have to go back to see them. I wouldn't.
You get to decide.
You get to decide.
My hot take of like, if you are a religious therapist, and that is like a specific modality, and like you really incorporate religion or faith or a specific type of religion into your therapy, and it is kind of like very much attached to your professional work as a therapist, right? Because I think there's a difference between being a therapist professionally and having your own personal beliefs, right? We talk about that all the time. And there's nothing wrong with having personal beliefs and also being a therapist. If the two, the separation of church and state remains separated. But if those two things are fused, like if your religion or your faith orientation is fused with who you are as a therapist professionally, do you only see clients that also are oriented in the same way? I don't know. That's something that I constantly struggle with, of like, is that fair to assume that like they can't take that hat off and assume like an unbiased kind of approach if a client doesn't have the same orientation spirituality wise? I don't know.
Because I know that my personal beliefs around queer identities or marginalized communities, like those are absolutely fused into who I am as a therapist. Like those are inseparable from each other. And that's okay to me. And so I guess it's like, where's the line when it comes to religion or other topics, other beliefs that you hold? Tricky.
Well, it also just brings up the conversation around, I think the conversation around mental health in the church and being raised in the church and all the things, like sitting through a sermon and being told, like, if you have anxiety or depression, you just don't have a good enough relationship with God. And I think as much as we want to believe that the conversation around mental health, it definitely, like, the progression of it has been great. And also, I think there are areas where it's moving a little bit more slowly. And so, hence the reason people are still being told to pray about it. Yeah. Well, just know that, you can pray about it. And also there are so many other things that you can do. Like there's so many other things.
Yeah. They can come see you, Erin. If you're in Texas, go see Erin. Sounds like she'd be a good fit.
I will not tell you to pray about it.
Erin won't. Oh man. Okay. Well, I feel like that is probably a good place to wrap. Unless, do we have other thoughts, or other feelings, or other questions, or comments?
A lot.
For today.
I will keep them
Maybe
to myself.
Okay. Cool. Well, stay tuned. We are going to have the wonderful and fabulous Miss Lauren Larkin on our next episode. We're so excited to have her. TikTok therapist, baddie, genius, boss babe, queen.
Great words.
We can't wait. We're so excited. Well, yeah, tune in next week and we will have a special show for you. Okay, we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.